I'm going to move on to the sort of main event of the show. We've done it before. We've done it on my show. We've done it on this show a couple of times. And it's the firing line. I'm going to give you some of the names that maybe, not your Dusty Rhodeses, not your Vern Gagne's, names that may not come up in like a first hour or two of a AWA conversation. I'm going to throw some at you. If you've got a story on them, throw it straight at me. And the first name I'm going to give you, if I can get that word out, is Dennis Stamp.
He was Dennis Buckle's ring partner. They had the ring. He was referee. He was from either University of North Dakota or up there. He went with one of the universities in North Dakota State. Good amateur wrestler, and ended up out at the farm there with Nick's brother Dennis, and then he ended up taking the ring around, and it was a friend of mine. He was one of the few guys that was my age, so I would get to a town and especially for flying somewhere, I'd go with hang out with the ring crew. Some of the time, the other times we didn't, but Dennis was up there. A lot of the North Dakota or those icy cities we worked.
Moose Cholak.
I didn't know him well, but knew him out of Chicago. Huge guy, big guy, just lumbering. He was real, look. He's talking about movies and stuff. He's looking for the reality. Really intelligent guy, but just a freight train. He ran over Ernie Ladd twice. One night when Ernie used to put that big foot up to catch you off the ropes, went right over Ernie, right over the top of the foot, hit the rope, came back, he put the foot up, and went over him again. Just ran right over him. And it's like, it was just huge guy. Seemed to be wanted to be intellectual. Talked intelligently. Further the Moose, the whole gimmick and stuff that he wrote. But I didn't know him well, but he seemed friendly.
Please tell anybody fooled please tell me this, right? Moose Cholak must be the guy who wore the entire moose head to the ring.
Yeah, that's him. Yeah.
Like who did the Moose nickname come first, or did the Moose head come first?
No idea. He was way before. He was at back to Stan Kowalski and back to that era. He was a complete era way. Dick the Bruiser and all those guys. That 50s, early 60s, or 60s.
I think you've brought him up before, Red Bastien.
Oh yeah, one of the great workers of the business. One of the great, could do anything. Guys, one of the, tremendous performer. Good guy. Ended up running the Cauliflower Alley Club. Just before his passing, and he was after he got out of the business. He married a lady from Texas who had some money, and all they did was travel around the world after that. And Red was one of the top talents. I remember I went to Fresno with him one night. Frank Noccetti was a referee, and he had homemade wine. They'd give you these gallon jugs, and I was driving. I met Red on the way to Fresno, and he rode with me and we're drinking out of that gallon jug of wine. Oh my God, that stuff was it's got all the sediment and stuff in it. You stay drunk for a week afterwards. It was crazy, but Red was a good time.
Yeah. Do you know what? I'm actually going to harp on Red Bastien a bit more. Can you give us a bit more of his history? Because, once again, I don't know too much about him. And, where was his big territories? Was it the AWA?
I think he came in his carnies. I think he came in the carny days. Worked the midways. I think he's one of those guys like Ray Stevens or he started way back when, 14 or 15, 16-year-old It just started before he got out of school, and just learned the business from the bottom up. Knew everything there was, to know about wrestling. So he ended up. What was he? He was in, but he worked around. He was because he was a tremendous talent. They used him all in those, upper United States there, Ohio, those areas, Chicago's, Indiana. But he got to Indianapolis. He got to the job for Barnett, booking Australia, and he was down there, and I don't know how, when, where, the particulars of it, but evidently Mark Lewin screwed him out of the job and took over got the book from Red to take over the Australia, because he had a good thing going in Australia with Barnett.
Was King Curtis around helping Mark by any chance?
Yeah, well, Curtis and Mark were partners. They were always, the good and the evil and the good guy. Curtis, believe it, Curtis was the good guy. He'd keep all the boys were happy. Everybody he'd keep everybody entertained, and Mark would come in for the hard clothes. The monies and the angles and who was going to get used and stuff. Yeah, they worked together well.
Yeah, I like how those two never saw a territory that they didn't want to steal at some point.
Yeah.
We'll move on then. You mentioned it before as well, Bobby Bruggers. I'll bring him up again.
Bruggers was a friend of Wally McDaniel's from the Miami Dolphins football team, and whether he wrestled in Florida or not, I don't know. But he was on that crew at the Vern's barn there, and he was part of that crew. Then he hurt something. He had legs, had some type of physical problem after that. Whether it was illness or a tear or hurt, he never progressed real far. After he worked maybe a year or two after that, did some stuff in Florida and Georgia, and as far as that was about the end of it.
This is a really big star, Dick Bayer.
Knew him from Hawaii. He was Dick Byers here, actually. I was just a young kid, but from down to the beach center, the Waikiki Beach and stuff, I don't think his family was real young at the time. Or even if he had a family back then, his boys I know were younger. He was around, good guy. And then went back and did that mask. He was a Dr. X Destroyer. So he was like the predominant masked man in internationally, because he had that in with Japan. With the tally-ho and all those, he was an amateur wrestler out of Syracuse. And what was he in Japan? Was he the Destroyer or Dr. X?
I think he'd be the Destroyer,
Destroyer, okay. Well, he was like wrestling too. Well, he set the precedent for wrestling too. He would go everywhere with his mask on. He wouldn't, I guess, everywhere he went, in Japan, on the trains or the bus, got off the bus. So he'd always, it's like Mil Mascaras. He was super conscientious, but he was, one of the top heels, or the top masked heel. I remember first it was like Zebra Kid, George Bolus. That was long before I got into the business. Then I remember Dick Byers, and I remember when I was a kid, he was managing Freddie Blassie over here in Hawaii. And then I guess he went to LA, got the mask. From LA, went to AWA and continued with the mask, and was a big success, and just stayed with the mask. Never listened to that once he, left Hawaii and started the Destroyer and Dr. X.
I made a statement that it was the Destroyer, but I'm going to have to check that while I ask you this next question, or while you answer this next question. Was it Dick Bayer who had the all-time wrestling television ratings record? Was it Ricky Dozan that he faced in the early 60s in Japan? And apparently just TV ratings were absolutely through the roof for it.
Don't know. Could have been him. Could have been Blassie. Depends how saturated the TV was at the time.
Yeah, it probably wouldn't have been the same. There we go. I've just googled it from JWA. Ricky Dozan versus the Destroyer. So yes, I was actually writing a wrestling question. Did he have one more thing about him? Did he ever introduce himself to you as Big Dick Hertz?
No.
Okay, I'll move on then. Ramon Torres. I think we brought him up before, actually, didn't we?
Yeah. I met him. He came into Omaha as a vendetta for his brother. His brother died in the ring with Ox and the Claw, Tom Andrews. So he came in. Some people didn't like it at the time. I don't know, but he came in like an avenging match with, and then he filtered over. I guess part of the deal. He came to Minneapolis right after that. He worked out, and he and I tagged a lot and traveled a lot together. He was a good guy, older fellow. Because I was in my early 20s then. He'd been around. Part of the Torres brothers, Enrique, Ramon, and.
You're going to make me Google this one as well, aren't you? While you're thinking.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, well, I'll ask you this next one. I'll Google that answer. Bull Belinsky.
Oh, yeah. Frank Shields. Great bump taker. He took me under his wing when I first came into AWA. I didn't know anything. I got an apartment out by where he lived outside, maybe 10, 12 miles out of Minneapolis City, and he was around. He kind of came in, and he came in after he and the Crusher were partners for a while there, as a bit, and then I don't know what happened, but the Crusher and Vern went into one of their fights, one of their feuds. So he picked up all the shots that the Crusher had, getting over Bockwinkel and all these other guys, but they ended up obviously changing the finish where he was putting him over instead of the Crusher going over. But he picked up all the stuff. Then he picked up the tag matches as he was Crusher's partner, and he picked up a bunch of stuff. And he was a handyman for Vern. He used to do all the carpentry and plumbing and all the stuff out at the ranch and out of Vern's house and stuff like that. He was a real handy guy.
It was Enrique Torres.
Oh, Enrique.
There you go. So it's Ramon, Enrique, and it was Alberto. Yeah, it was Alberto. Yeah.
Alberto. Yeah.
Okay. I've got a few more for you. So George Scrapine Gdaski, you mentioned him before as well.
Yeah, the referee.
Yeah.
Yeah, he would. He had everything. He'd collect old he'd sell old programs. He'd drive across all South Dakota, North Dakota in that cold, barren winter. He'd put cans of food inside of his inside his engine and drive and heat it. and it would heat the can, and he was frugal, lived on the road, must have made a fortune. He and Vern were always fighting over one thing or another, had his own ring. And, very rarely he didn't make a town. But if he was having trouble with the truck, it would turn, he would never went to, well, one time when we wrestled on the grass. But aside from that, he was almost always there. Or I'll be there, I'm on my way, I'm coming. And he'd roll up about 8:30 and set up in front of the crowd and everything, But he was reliable, worked for years for Vern.
Were the referees always the ring crew as well?
Probably to a portion, because they're always on they're in all the towns. They had to be all in the towns. I remember Ricky Hunter had the ring in Florida, and Kadaski and like Stamp and Buckle when they had for Vern. So yeah, I guess it was Paul Pershman, Buddy Rose. He worked with Kadaski. I think he'd let him set up the ring. He'd set up the ring for Gadaski, and he'd let Paul go in and work out and take bumps and stuff. He was a hell of a worker before he even started working.
Hans Herman.
Didn't know him. Let's see. I'm thinking Hans Mortier. Hans Herman too. He was an older guy, and come from German, real funny, real aristocratic.
You said there's actually a German wrestler who was actually German. I think that might be a first.
I believe so. I believe he was. Yeah. And he didn't really play the gimmick up well. I did a little bit, a little Sieg Heil and stuff, but he wasn't. He was too old. He didn't want the heat. I guess he had got good heat, different parts. When he was younger, in different territories. At this point, and he wasn't looking for any kind of red, white hot heat to incite any riots or anything else.
We've mentioned George Scott before. I think we can move on to the last two if you want, or anything else with George Scott.
No, I can think of.
Okay, Rene Goulet.
Sarge, yeah, he was a heel. He hadn't developed that Legionnaire thing or anything yet. No, he was a baby. Was he a heel? No, he was still a baby face. At that time, he was a hell of a baby face. He was, he was a hell of a worker, period, He was a good baby face. Real Buckle type style, abdominal stretch, and wrestling like that out of Montreal. Real good guy.
How was his agenting style in the WWF? Was he the biggest panicker in the back?
No, he was cool. Guys got along with him. He was always, level-headed. Didn't try to run the show, just, carry the message.
We'll give you one more, and then we will call it a day. Joe Scarpello.
Nice guy. Didn't know him well. He's one of those, I think it was Omaha. He moved over to Omaha. You talk to him, you wouldn't think, he was a licensed 007 licensed killer. Just nice, big pair of hands and a little guy. He was, God, if he was 210 maybe, and then he was just Danny Hodge type deal, not even Danny Hodge kind of guy. Just wouldn't expect anything out of this guy. Nicest guy, sweet, congenial, talking, but evidently, he could rip some ears off.
Who did he attempt to rip some ears off of? Did you hear?
Well, they bring him in, the guys at the ranch and stuff. They do the thing, after they'd run 2 or 3 miles and 1,000 squats, 1,000 push-ups, 1,000 this, bumps back and forth across the ring again, and then they'd get down and do some amateur wrestling or something. He'd be one of the guys, Danny Hodge, him, some of those guys, that they weren't going to feed him fresh iron chic or anything. They were just there doing Vern a favor, and Vern bring him up for a week or two and book him around the territory, make him a good payday, and they'd pay allegiance, as it were, to the Vaganyas out at the barn. The guys coming up, they were legends that they knew, and evidently impressed to be trained by somebody like that.
Did Vern ever get his hands dirty and wrestle the prospects himself, or never?
Oh yeah, he was out there. He'd get out there. He'd everybody going through tricks and running, and he'd be doing the calisthenics. Be a place for him to work out. Get a different workout in. Vern was his athletic person. Obviously, he came from a football player. wrestler in high school and college, Olympics, I guess. It was all his career. He was, athletic guy.